one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to another episode of Knowledge in Action. Today we have brother Shayan Parsai with us. Shayan is a legal immigration attorney, and he is also invested in building institutions here in America. How are you doing, brother?
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. As always, we jump straight into it. Shayan, as I know, you started something called The Bustan. Tell us, what is it like building an institution from scratch?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've been following the episodes, and I think it's a great initiative that you guys have started, and alhamdulillah, we're definitely all benefiting from it. With regard to the Bustan, the initiative basically started, me and my wife, Janala Akhras, started holding small halaqat to discuss and learn about the surah of the Quran, and to do tafasir and this kind of thing, just in our local community amongst our friends. And we started to think that, do we know of any other initiatives that are going live and doing these kinds of things? And we searched and we said, no, there are plenty. And that kind of spurred us into thinking, well, why not put out some of our own conversations and open it up to the community. Part of the issue was also consistency, and sometimes we would have friends that wouldn't be able to show up to a halqa, and obviously that was a little bit difficult because we were learning in a cumulative fashion. And so we decided it would be good to start recording the sessions so that if anybody missed anything, they could go back and watch it. And then, having mom in a different city and sister in a different city and other people that were interested in what we were doing, they said, well, why don't you find a way for us to be able to see it too? And I said, well, we want that interaction. So maybe that live aspect was missing. And so we decided, why don't we just start up our own little thing and see where it takes us and just produce content and go from there. For me personally, the Bustan was just really an extension of, what we were doing at home already as it was. And I think obviously people can go and find shuyukh and, learned individuals who can teach them. But part of it was that we wanted to work through the text ourselves in a way. And I think the Bustan was a good way of doing that. Part of the problem that I see sometimes with modern institutions is there is such a gap in the wealth of knowledge that the student may have in comparison to the teacher, or there may be a distance, or there may be some sort of feeling of embarrassment of not knowing enough or something, whatever it is that is breaking that gap in between us and the instructor. And I thought that what we kind of need sometimes is to have a institution where we can trust each other, where we don't feel judged for the level of knowledge that we have, for the amount of experience we have, for as long as we've been committed to Islam or trying to learn about Islam and this kind of thing. And so I really felt that the Bustan could take that issue and provide a solution for it in that way that, hey, look, we don't have all the answers, but here is, a lot of great resources. Here is what we have learned on our own. Here is our opinions, and maybe that will help you, in your search for finding out what the truth is, at the end of the day. So I think that that's what's been the most rewarding is being able to be consistent, both in our immediate community, but also opening it up such that other people can feel that they are too, in the space that we are occupying.
So tell me a little bit more about the vibe when you kind of invite people. What kind of sense do you want to create in the room in that culture of learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said initially, it was just our friends, and still the core critical mass of our group are just friends that we have known. but there was a time where I started to like say to Jenna and to the rest of the group that, you know, what we're doing I think is important, and maybe we should try to find a way to open this up to people. And so for about a month or so before, maybe even a little bit more, 4 or 5 weeks before this whole COVID situation started, we started holding our sessions at Masjid Noor here in Columbus, in their library section. And alhamdulillah, we did have a few people who, after seeing, you know, us advertising about these sessions, they started to come. And so that was really great because we started to create that bond, just using the internet, you know, that, you know, advertising in that way. And people felt like, oh, this is interesting. I want this feeling and this need for a young Muslim collective that are young professionals, you know, out of school, or, you know, but mainly focused for those who are now finished with school and moving on into the next stage in life. And being able to like have that network. And then obviously because of this current situation, we haven't been able to like fully launch everything that we wanted to do. We have some things in the pipeline. We want to start like a conversation series in which we start to talk about, you know, different professions and different types of fields of study that we've all accomplished and like gone through, to be able to open that network, not only to ourselves but to the local community, and then the community, the Muslim community at large, who does get on the internet. And so that is still in the works and it's coming. But the most important thing for us first was to get started. And I thought that once we did that, we became way more active. And I think it's the initial fear of saying, well, maybe my content isn't good enough. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there'll be only 2 or 3 viewers. And that tends to slow us down and say, I'm not qualified and I shouldn't do this. But then again, you know, I think the quality is going to show itself regardless. And there is a certain aspect of when you produce content that you're going to be on your game and you're going to do your best to prepare for the sessions, and you're going to do your best to be able to provide, you know, information that is going to be useful to just at least the immediate surrounding. And I think that, you know, staying on course with that has been really helpful for us to be able to do that. So alhamdulillah, so far it's going very well.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Tell I know you mentioned to me before about and you were the one who actually brought it to my attention, the Usuli Institute. Tell me what was a source of inspiration, or was the Usuli Institute a source of inspiration, and why do you have a endearment, or what do you find interesting about that institution?
Absolutely, yeah. I think in a lot of ways the Bustan is modeled after the Usuli Institute. So the Usuli Institute is a nonprofit organization based out of Los Angeles, California. The executive director is Grace Song. She's a convert of over 20 years, who converted prior to meeting her husband, who is Sheikh and Dr. Khalid Abu Fadl, who teaches at UCLA, at the law school as well as the graduate school. And he is a professor of Islamic law, actually, and one of the only ones in the country at UCLA. An incredibly knowledgeable individual. He studied with many Ashari Sheikhs in Masr growing up, the most famous of which is Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali. And he came to the States in his early 20s to study at Yale. He finished his undergraduate degree, and then he also got his degree in his law degree, as well as a PhD in Islamic studies from Princeton, and the law degree was from Pittsburgh. So a highly decorated academic, both secularly and in the traditional space of training. I really appreciate his methodology above all others that I've seen up until today. It's his implementation and his the role of reason in his work is absolutely refreshing, as well as his insistence on maintaining our relationship with the intellectual tradition from which we come from. And he presses this very heavily. He says, we have this intellectual tradition. It's our, in fact, he calls it intellectual heritage, which is a very interesting way of putting it. And then feeling that ownership as though it belongs to me, that we've inherited this knowledge of sorts, but then we realize that we don't have that close of a relationship with these scholars and these jurists who have, suffered so much and endured so much over, 14th century period, for us to simply just, pay them lip service, or just not even realize what they've done for the religion, and across all boards, and so this variety and this massive amount of knowledge that he finds a way to pack into his khutbahs and his tafasir and all of these sessions have been absolutely invaluable to me as a Muslim. I feel completely reinvigorated through what he's done at the institution thus far. And it's a shame that, an institution like his doesn't get the amount of credit that it deserves. And more importantly, it doesn't get the amount of funding that it deserves. And I think, unfortunately, that speaks to an issue that we have in the States specifically. I don't know about other places in the West. But when somebody has their own methodology and is as highly trained and high ranking of a jurist as somebody like Sheikh Abu Fadl, and he gives like a fatwa, or he gives an opinion, or he, goes about practicing the religion in a way that's somewhat different than what, the mainstream Muslim would consider to be, on track with. Unfortunately, people react to that in a negative fashion. And I think that that has been his experience in over 20, 30 years in this country. And in fact, just recently, I think it was about last year, when President Morsi passed away, he was scheduled to give a khutbah following the death of President Morsi at I think it's called the Southern California Muslim Institute. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's this mosque in Southern California that's super well known. I can't remember the name at the time. But nonetheless, he grew up, so to speak, as he says, in that masjid, and in like building this masjid. And it seemed that over time, there were a lot of individuals who would come up to the board and would say, we are upset with the fact that Dr. Abu Fadl is using politics and referring to politics in his khutbahs, specifically, obviously, being very critical of the Egyptian government is the position that they had this issue with. To which Abu Fadl says that likely these people have money invested, with the government, and they find this, somewhat upsetting to them when they're coming to the Friday khutbah. They don't want to listen to, these transgressions that they are involved with. And so, to cut a long story short, he had been planning to do a funeral prayer obviously from distance for President Morsi after the khutbah. And for this reason, the board forbade him and essentially banned him from the masjid. And this was obviously deeply concerning to us who had seen Sheikh Abu Fadl give khutbahs there for many a year. But also on a more important level, it was extremely distressing to see a respected Muslim institution not recognize the importance of dedication to justice, at minimum through speech. As we know, the famous hadith that says that the lowest part of our iman would be speaking out against injustice in our hearts, and then just above that would be using the tongues. Obviously, we can't do much here in the States besides speak out, and that would then become incumbent upon us. And I think having a leader as strong and as knowledgeable as him, we need somebody who is willing to come and risk all that they have in order to do this, because not all of us can do that. I mean, many of us plan on going back home to Egypt or Iran or Jordan or wherever it is, and we have a lot of issues there. We can't speak as freely, but somebody has dedicated their life to saying, you know what, I will live with this danger and I will speak about this. This was wholly disheartening to see that even on that level, forget about his fatwas and his methodology. If you disagree with that, at least we can all agree on this need for speaking out for justice. And unfortunately, many institutions have if they haven't silenced him, they've ignored him, and that was really hurtful for me. So part of what I saw the Bustan as being was a platform to extend his voice and his methodology to those people who may find it refreshing and invigorating in the same way that I also found it. And so that kind of really did help me to structure the kind of things that we are discussing in the halaqas. For example, we focus specifically on the Quran as much as possible. And as I started to realize that our local community needs a little bit more of a fundamental understanding of the events that take place in the Quran and the life events of the Prophet and the seerah of the Prophet, we have now kind of taken a little bit of a pivot towards doing the seerah, and now we are completing a book called Fiqh al-Seerah by Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, as we are going through that for the next 4 or 5 weeks maybe, until we have that strong understanding. And that's something that I learned from the Usuli Institute, that that initial fervor and that love needs to be replicated the same way that the Sahaba had for the Prophet. They converted and followed the message of Islam because of the Prophet, right? And so we need to really figure out what it is that they saw in him that really made them cling on to him through the harshest of challenges. And then obviously now 14 centuries later, his legacy is still there. So we are building basically based off of what we are learning from Usuli and trying to replicate it on a smaller scale in our local community, and trying to see if we can bridge, these gaps.
It's amazing. As you were speaking, I had come across an article prior to this call. I was talking about how managing a family is almost like the first step to like managing a government. That when someone knows how to take care of the finances and the personal relationships, and especially when that family becomes larger, it becomes more and more necessary for someone to develop good organizational skills, and that is in itself an institution. And I guess maybe you can speak about this in a way, if possible. But when we talk about activism and justice, we talk about larger institutions, right? And I think a lot of people, they strive to build big institutions, but they lack the willpower to speak out against justice. Maybe you can speak about how maybe groups of friends or couples, newly married couples, may become the future for leading that activism charge or standing up for justice.
100%.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is to continue to go back to the seerah, to learn the methodology implemented by God through the Prophet ﷺ. He shows us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us the need for community building from the beginning, building from within one's home, the ayat that come and the commands that come to the Prophet to say, now you have to invite your closest of kin and your clan to the message first. You need to build this critical mass, right? And you need to be able to, you can't take care of, as just exactly as you said, you can't take care of things going on outside of the home without ensuring that everything works inside the home first. I mean, it's kind of the idea of when the plane is going down and the oxygen masks fall out, you have to take care of yourself first before you go to your neighbors and your partners, right? Or else, the foundation in which you're building has a hole in it. And that's exactly what we kind of realized, was that, the first, and I think part of this also has to do with the maturity that comes with thinking about marriage and knowing that you're going to start a family soon. We have to be able to answer these really complicated and pressing questions that our next generation is going to have, and I try to always tell everybody that's around me that, we have this link to our culture and our language as Muslims who are, coming from immigrant families. Obviously, there are plenty who are born and raised here as Muslims, and then the generations come from there. But us as immigrants, we need to be able to hold on to our language and our tradition and our intellectual heritage. And that will become more and more difficult the more that we are removed from that initial migration, right? So that really kind of motivated me and made me realize okay, I need to be able to, even if I don't know the information immediately, I need to be able to produce the information such that I can answer these questions, because it's hard enough for us as it is, as first generation children of immigrants, Muslim children of immigrants, to be able to connect with the religion and to connect with the ethos of the religion. Here, given the fact that our parents have come and it's still that difficult. Now imagine, we are now going to have second or third generation children whose parents don't have accents and don't have the issue of understanding what happens in life and all these kinds of things. They may feel more integrated into American society, which is a positive thing, of course, but that integration, as long as it's not, keeping us from having that link to our intellectual heritage and with our heritage with the prophetic movement and the prophetic mission. So yeah, I definitely think that that's the most important thing for us to do is to clean up house and build our own house, build it on a structure and a foundation that we can trust, before opening up to going and solving problems elsewhere. But this idea of activism, I think, is an interesting issue that we have at hand. And I think the idea of activism also goes hand in hand with the idea of being charitable and donating toward charitable causes and having this function within the masjid. And I have seen a lot of people even during the COVID era that will say, we need to do something like a food drive, or we need to do something like a COVID drive or something like that for the local community at large. And while I applaud the ethos behind it and the emotional thing behind it, trying to help Muslims and non-Muslims alike, yes, this is definitely Quranic ethos. However, if we think back to the early time of Islam, all of the wealth that was being spent on Muslims. And Muslims needed to look out for Muslims, because if they didn't, and if their entire project wasn't surrounding building that foundation and to ensure that the health and safety and the knowledge and the intellect was not preserved within that initial critical mass, Islam would have failed. At least, if Allah had willed for it to fail, of course. But it would have failed without that kind of building that foundation. And so I think right now, besides even money, and besides building institutions through donations and this kind of thing, the thing that we are lacking the most at this time is knowledge, divine knowledge, and knowledge of our deen, of our ethos, of what we stand for. This is incredibly important, and the reason that it's so important is because it's not simply not having knowledge. Right now we are not having enough knowledge, but also we are under attack, right? The Islamophobic campaign that has been rampant in the United States for over 20 years now, and even before that, has been working hard and has not taken a single day off, not a single hour off. And in fact, they have received billions and billions of dollars of funding. Chairs have been endowed on the academic level. And then, of course, we see the news and the media outlets and the TV and every single medium possible has been chipping in and trying to somehow stifle the growth of Islam and absolutely neutralize it as a system of thinking, because they know very well that Islam is a theology and a ideology of liberation, right? And that is a big bump in the road for the projects that are taking place in the West generally. So what we need to think and what we need to realize and we need to learn about, why is it that this fundamental theology of liberation is being stifled? That will in turn help us to understand what are the problems and what Islam is standing against, right? Why did Islam come to exist to be? And so we spend a lot of time talking about each mission of each prophet and how they stood up to the powers that were at the time that they were there, and what were exactly the corrupting factors of those power institutions, and why it matters that we need to learn. We are only as strong as our weakest link, right? So down to our very youngest, our youth need to learn this from scratch, and they need to come up. And that's part of my own methodology, my own understanding. That we need to know that we are here and we have a mission, and our mission is to deny that which is wrong and uphold that which is right. And so to be able to do that, we need to have knowledge. So if we can focus our time and our energy less on some of these things that churches and synagogues and other institutions, the Red Cross, they're doing these things, and this is good and good on them for that. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them victory for those things and give them value, reward them for that which they do for humanity at large. That is wonderful. but we need to look after ourselves first. And that includes ensuring that we are making small institutions that are approachable for those people who need to learn and want to learn and have that yearning to be able to grow both intellectually and spiritually, to be able to take on these future issues that we have. And so I think that is the way forward to being able to be an activist in the way, with the ethos of Islam, right? To come and be able to solve these problems in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us through the Quran and through the seerah of the Prophet.
SubhanAllah, Shayan, this has been very, very insightful for me. Before we have to go, if you could please share with us what's the best way we can stay in touch with the Bustan and yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So our primary medium is on Instagram. You can find us just simply the Bustan, Thebustan. We also have a YouTube page in which we have put on our previous halaqat that we've done. We've done maybe over 7 chapters of the Quran at this point, and in detail. And we've put out now 2 or 3 episodes now we've had of over about an hour and a half on the seerah. And we have very many other programs that we're doing. Currently, I am throughout the month of Ramadan, I am reading almost nightly. I am reading sections from the chapter of Sheikh Khalid Abu Fadl, the Conference of the Book, Search for Beauty, a really beautiful work of poetry and prose, but also tackling juristic issues in that book, an absolutely wonderful book. So you can definitely reach me on the Instagram website. If you want to email us, you can do so at thebustan7@gmail.com. So yeah, that is primarily where we are focused. We also have a Twitter account. If you look us up there, you can message us. So very, very approachable in that sort of way. Yeah, definitely send the messages if you have them to get involved.
Jazakallah khair so much, Shayan. Thank you all for attending another session. We hope to see you next week on Sunday, inshallah, at the same time, 5:30 p.m. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.